Good evening, welcome to this live feed. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hoping everybody is beautifully well. This evening, we're opening up a discussion around fear, around how fear affects our relationships, our most sacred relationships, how fear and the various fears that we experience in life on so many different levels actually affect our capacity to bond and our capacity to connect and our capacity to be very present. My apologies. I'm just making an adjustment on the camera. There we go. Cool. So how do we become better acquainted with self? How do we move through these fears that we experience? And how do we, at some point, observe our fears, absorb them, move through them so they do not affect us negatively and they do not impede upon us or impede our relationships? So as you're coming on board, please place a number 1 in the comment box so that I know that you're here. That would be wonderful. And also let me know how you're feeling this evening. Let me know with an emoticon how you're feeling and the space that you're occupying right now, because that will also really lend itself to what you choose to experience and the information, how you absorb the information and in what way as well. So fear. Now, there's 12 fears that we're going to be looking at here. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at the so just general fears that occupy our unconscious self most of the time, and sometimes our conscious self as well. And then we're going to look at the fears that we have or that we experience in relationship. Now, there are multiple fears in life. There aren't only 12, but I've chosen 12 major life fears that then impede our relationships and 12 very specific fears that we feel in relationship. And when I'm referring to relationship, I'm referring to relationship to self, I'm referring to relationship to another, our beloved, for example. I'm referring to our intimate relationships, our familial relationships, our relationships with our friends, with our close people in our lives, with colleagues and so forth. It affects the way fear affects fear. It is not connected to, if it is not felt, if it is not understood fully, it impacts the way we communicate, it impacts the way we relate to people. So what I would like to do is first begin with the major life fears that we experience and then how they actually impact negatively our relationships, how they allow us to view our relationships from a restricted state of being, a restricted place, instead of an open, conscious, empowered space. And there are many of us out there that will relate to at least one of these fears, if not all of them, potentially in the past, perhaps in the present, and perhaps in the future as well. It's not so much the experience of these fears or these states, because states are transient, let's remember that. States are never permanent. We live in an impermanent world, so we're in constant flux. And the more that we can actually recognize that, the more that we can embrace that, what that does for us and the way we choose to move through life really allows us to also gain the most from each experience, as opposed to being stuck in that fear and being immobile, not being able to move, not being able to flourish and thrive in relationships. So the first major fear that we experience, or the life fear that we experience, is a fear of poverty. Now, when we're speaking to a fear of poverty, we're also speaking to a fear of scarcity. So it's scarcity in external resources, and it's scarcity in terms of what we have access to in terms of our inner power as well. So our ability to access happiness, for example. So if you can resonate with this fear, place number 2 in the comment box. Place number 2 in the comment box if you can resonate with a fear of scarcity, having experienced at some point in your life a fear of scarcity, not being connected to the abundance that is life, not believing that you have access to abundance in your life. So if we come from a place of scarcity, let's because everything we're going to speak to this evening, we're going to place it in a context of relationship. And for the purposes of today, I will refer to the intimate type of relationship. So a relationship of eros, so a relationship of intimate bonding, yeah? So how can scarcity affect our intimate relationships? Well, if we move into relationship thinking and feeling that either we are not enough or that we cannot access the skills or the tools or the expressions or the communication to really enhance this relationship, the relationship will remain stagnant. The relationship won't grow and flourish. And this becomes problematic because then what happens is we've got two individuals that aren't really communicating with each other, two individuals that aren't really present with each other. This becomes disempowering instead of empowering. So sit with that for a moment. Sit with the fact that scarcity, fear of poverty, brings our attention and our focus on scarcity itself, brings our attention and our focus on a poverty mentality as opposed to a mentality of fullness and abundance. Therefore, when we begin to move in relationship, we move in relationship with a mentality of fragmentation, fracturing, of brokenness as opposed to fullness or wholeness. So this scarcity mentality, this lack, this mentality of lack, this mentality or this approach to life of poverty allows us to live a fragmented, broken, mediocre life. So I'm going to discuss later on how we move past these fears, how we transition through these fears, and how we can benefit tremendously our own being by being present to these fears, by understanding them, by connecting to them, by being whole to them, and not running away from them, not suppressing them. So the second life fear is a fear of old age. And we have this is really interesting. This is deeply psychological, okay? Not only in our individual psyche, but also our collective psyche. We come into this world and we have certain certainties. We have very specific certainties, and one of those is death. And in fact, later on we'll speak to a fear of death. That is one of the 6 major life fears. But a fear of old age brings us closer to that fear of death. And in old age, we cannot do or we cannot be what we once were. We cannot be what we used to be. We cannot move as well as we did. We don't generally think as sharply. Biologically and physiologically, we are shutting down, so to speak. We are slowing down the organism. Therefore, we're not as active as we were as well. So the fear that this brings into relationships is that we do not often have enough time. So when we're speaking to old age, we're speaking to not having enough time. We're speaking to not having enough time to be all that we wish to be, to experience all that we wish to experience. Now, what that can do in relationship is actually powerful. It has the opposite effect. Instead of or it does 2 things actually, sorry. It either has the opposite effect where we immerse ourselves in a relationship and we become paralyzed by not understanding where we need to go and what we need to do in this relationship, who we need to be and how we truthfully need to embody this relationship. This becomes deeply problematic for the way we interact in the relationship. Because again, our focus, when we are in fear, our focus is on the fear instead of our focus being on the growth, our focus being on our relations, our focus being on ourselves and the way we are enveloping in this relationship. Now, just a point, beautiful people. I think there's an issue with Facebook at the moment because I don't know if any of you are commenting, and I would like to assume that some of you are. I'm not getting any comments here. I cannot see any comments at all. So And I've got a strange URL waiting sequence telling me that it's waiting for something to happen in the chat sequence on Facebook. So I apologise if you're asking questions or if you're interacting and I can't respond to that because I'm just not seeing it. So my apologies there, but I'm going to continue anyway, and we'll just keep moving and keep asking your questions. I'm sure we'll record and I'll be able to get to them later if we need to, okay? So back to the fear of old age. So again, linked to a fear of poverty or scarcity. In our old age, we begin to focus, we begin to focus more on ourselves in terms of keeping our body healthy. Now, whilst our relationship to self can be enhanced to some degree, what can happen is our relationships to others can come down. Our relationships to others can be experienced almost at a loss. In older age, we really begin to reflect deeply on who we are and who we've been in life. We really begin to reflect on how have we behaved in life? Who have we been? What have we done? What ethos have we embodied? How have we treated other people? How have we treated ourselves? We begin to ask ourselves some really big questions. Now, depending on the life that we've lived, have we lived a life of ignorance? Have we lived a life that has been ruled by fear? Have we lived a life that has been in ecstasis? A life that has been full of joy? We don't really ask these questions more often than not until we reach a point where we're almost forced to ask these really big questions of life. And what it does is it can affect our relationships because it allows us to reflect, be introspective in such a way that we begin to realize who we've been. And let's face it, the reality is we are not perfect beings, and that's okay. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, perfection or imperfection, but the reality is we've generally hurt people and we've hurt ourselves along the way in our journey. And this causes an issue for us, and it can deeply, deeply overwhelm us. So as we have this fear of old age and we become attached to this fear of old age, we begin to lose ourselves in what that is. Now, if you're just joining me, please place the number 1 in the comment box. If you're new to the live feeds, please place new in the comment box. I'm hoping that you are able to comment. As I mentioned earlier, there's an issue with the comments, it seems, at this point in time. But nevertheless, we shall continue and continue to prevail through this live feed and go through these fears. So the third life fear is a fear of facing criticism, okay? And this is huge. So people, what we will generally do as people is we will refrain and hold back our natural, authentic expression because we have this obsession of being, this obsessive fear of being criticized. We do not want to be criticized. It hurts our ego too much. It places us in disarray. We have no idea who we are, what we're doing, and where we are going. And ultimately what this does is the people in our lives and the world essentially does not get the fullness of who we are. The world does not receive the wonder of who we are. Sit with that for a moment. And if you can relate to that, where you have refrained from expressing yourself fully, place the number 3 in the comment box. If you have been that person that has been too fearful to express or communicate themselves articulately or in such a way that is your open, honest truth, perhaps you've been hurt, perhaps you are stuck on an issue and a problem, but you do not wish to be criticized in whatever capacity. You've held yourself back. What that does to you, it distances you from your authentic nature. It distances you from your truth. And more importantly, what it does is it limits your authentic nature, and it limits the quality. It hinders the quality. It locks in and constricts the quality of your intimate partnerships. It constricts the quality of your intimate relationships. And it does so because we lose ourselves in being someone we are not, because we are attempting to satisfy, gratify, and impress the status quo. And we lose ourselves in that process. So give me a number 4 in the comment box if you can resonate with that. I sure am hoping these comments are working because I'm not seeing anything at the moment. But we shall continue, yeah? So Fear of criticism stunts our capacity to thrive in a relationship, and it also stunts our capacity to get what we want in relationship. I did a live feed on this not so long ago about getting what you want in relationship, and you can look at those archives in my YouTube channel on the live feeds playlist, which is on the homepage, S.Sifandos, and you'll be able to scroll through and you'll see the title there. So we're losing ourselves in relationship when we are not being ourselves, and we have a fear of criticism because we stunt our growth and we do not express ourselves. And effectively, we begin also to attract the wrong type of people. We don't attract people in our lives that are in alignment. We do not attract people in our lives that hold true to our values, that resonate with us. There's a resonance there that is very, very low. Of course, there'll be some form of resonance, but it's low, like it's super low. And the matching there is really misaligned. So it's so important for us to speak, to communicate, to express our truth, whether it be verbally or non-verbally, in order for us to be heard, to be felt, to be seen, to be known. And there's great power in that. There's tremendous neurological, psychological, emotional, relational, social power in being seen, being heard, being felt, and being known. And I go through this in my workshops, where we map out how the limitations of not being, or what limits us from being in a conscious relationship or in a space of conscious relating, and then what enhances our ability to be in a space of conscious relating, and eradicating fears and moving away from our fears, moving through our fears rather, and really embracing them, understanding them, connecting to them, allows us to be closer connected to the source of who we are, but also to move through our fears and really be the most profound version of self. You can resonate with that. Place number five in the comment box, please. So the next is, and this is huge, this is huge. So the loss of love. So the fear of losing love. And what will generally happen in this context is people will be so scared of losing love because the pain is so overwhelming, and or the thought projected pain and felt pain or projected pain is so overwhelming that we don't even engage in love. We do not even engage in bonding and in connecting and in being with those that we love and that we care about. And it's so sad. It's so sad to see that. And when I deal with the people, the beautiful people that I work with, I see so many people that have previous wounding and trauma around expressing love because they have a fear of not of losing love. It's not even a fear of not being loved. I mean, that's part of it. We'll go into that into the next six. In the 6 fears around relationships specifically, but it's the fear of losing love, of having it, of experience the profound nature of intimate bonding and connecting, and then losing self in that and losing love for whatever reason. And this is really evident in what is happening today on social media with respect to the hashtag #MeToo posts, where we are seeing people that have been traumatized generally at a young age, but also as young adults, and then refraining from immersing themselves in love because they don't want to feel love and then lose it again, or feel love and that love be manipulated, or that love be turned or transmuted into something toxic. And it's a problem in our society. And as a beautiful friend of mine said earlier today, having a discussion, it really is an indication of the fracturing in our society, of the fragmentation in our society. So this becomes problematic with respect to our engagement in love and the way we move through the world. And if you can relate to that, if you can relate to having that fear of a loss of love, place a number 6 in the comment box. I think I'm up to number 6. Next is fear of ill health. So generally those that, obviously those that have a hyper response or reaction to having a fear of ill health are hypochondriacs or have a pathology around their relationship to physical health and wellness. But let's not go into that so much right now. Let's move into a fear of ill health and how that affects our relationship. So generally, to have these fears that are quite dominant and prominent in our thought paradigms, in our embodied being, what it generally means is our attention. So if we have a fear of ill health, we generally, the paradox is that we're not necessarily going to be, some people will eat really well and look after nutrition, exercise and rest and be so caught up in that, but they'll be caught up in that in a hyper-obsessed way. And it's an unhealthy relating to self, but importantly, it does not leave much space for us to relate to others in a meaningful, deep manner. This becomes problematic as well for depth in relationship, for quality in relationships, for actually moving in relationship in such a way that allows us to be completely present to that, because we become obsessed. We become obsessed in an unhealthy way with this fear of ill health, this fear of not being healthy, of not experiencing health in our lives. So this becomes a problem, okay? It becomes a problem on so many different levels, especially with the way that we relate to ourselves and the way that we relate to our loved ones. So if you can relate to that, place number 7 in the comment box. And what generally happens as well is that, and then please, if you're, by the way, if any of you are experiencing or have experienced these fears, if you wish to share some of that, again, I cannot see the comments right now, there's something wrong with Facebook, but if any of you wish to share any of that, please feel free to share some of your fears around that and the relationship you have with respect to these fears. Yeah, it'll be wonderful to see that, to read that at some point when these comments come back online. So that fear of ill health really drives the way we interact with the world and the way we interact with ourselves. And lastly, in terms of the 6 major life fears, we're looking at a fear of death. And we become so obsessed with this fear of death that sometimes we cultivate, because fears lend themselves to our belief systems, and our belief systems lay the foundations for how we move through life, the action that we take, the behaviors that we elicit, and the type of people that we are. So the types of experiences that we attract in our lives is as simple as that. So if we have an underlying fear that we are really deeply scared of death, what will generally happen is that we'll cultivate belief systems around how we need to be. So sometimes we may hold a belief system of fear of missing out. Or we may hold a belief system of you only live once. So the acronyms in modernity are FOMO and YOLO. I don't really like saying them, but anyway. But yeah, we cultivate these ideas around how we should live. Therefore, we sometimes become risky with our behaviour. We do not take into account others. We become less empathetic, less compassionate, and we ultimately become disconnected from others. We become disconnected from the beautiful people in our lives that actually lend themselves to our health and our own well-being. And we begin to ignore them, and we begin to ignore the value that people bring into our lives. And in doing so, we negate the quality aspects of that relationship, and we lose our ability to really be present in that relationship. So having that fear of death can lead us to being hyper-selfish and being hyper self-absorbed in a negative way, in a way that hurts others and doesn't really consider the feelings and the states of others, or the embodied states of others as well. And again, we distance ourselves from connecting and bonding deeply. And because we have a fear of death, and we go back to the fear of loss of love as well, these fears, they drive our behavior in the sense and in terms of how we choose to love as well. We will not go deep. We'll remain in the superficial, because if we remain in the superficial, if the relationship does end, but rather, and I say the end like that because really the relationship is never ending. The relationship is just transmuting. Experiences transmute from one state to the other. They transform and transmute. They don't so much change or end or begin. There's a continuum rather, yeah? And look, we can get lost in semantics to some degree, but essentially and effectively what we're looking at is understanding self through our inner state and our inner world. And if we are occupied deeply by fears, we are going to be overrun by these very fears that control us, and we will become fear itself. So when we're looking at these, and if you resonate with that, if you've had that fear of death yourself, or maybe that you don't want to die too young, and you have so much to do in this world, and there's so much that needs to occur, and etc. etc. You lose yourself. You lose yourself in that fear, and you completely disconnect and disengage. And if you can resonate with that particular fear, place number 8, please. That'd be wonderful. So let's move on to the six major relationship fears. So these are 6 fears that are very specific to relationship. What I did with the 6 major life fears was really just bring them into context and connect them to how they affect us in relationships, so relationship to self and relationship to our beloved and loved ones and of all other things. But now I want to speak to very specifically fear in relationship and what hinders, what potentially and possibly hinders our ability to immerse ourselves in relationship and immerse ourselves in depth and in love because of these fears. And really what happens is we live a mediocre life. We live a very basic life. Now, there's nothing wrong with living a simple life, but what I mean is we really do not explore the fullness of that potential, and we do not explore the magic of who we are and how we can actually move through the world. And again, when we're looking at life, we're looking at this being completely problematic with respect to our values and adhering to our purpose, like being deeply present to our purpose. So the first, and this is in no particular order, and of course there are so many more fears than this in relationship in particular, but let's just begin with betrayal. So betrayal is huge, especially in this day and age, on so many different levels. Having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, with a close friend, with respect to sexuality, sexual orientation, sexual or gender identification as well. And what we don't understand, we generally push away, and we are more inclined to betray what we do not understand. And in a world of so much information overload, and we're exiting the era of information, and we're moving into various other eras. But we won't go into that because I don't want to get on a tangent. But what's really important to understand here is that as we move through this fear of betrayal, we are overloaded with so much in our world, and what we don't understand, we really push away, we really reject. So it's far easier for us to betray someone that we do not understand, that we do not care, not that we don't care about, but that we care less about, than it is to really betray someone that we care about deeply, profoundly, that we admire, that we revere, that we respect. So holding that fear of betrayal within us, so there's 2 things I'm saying here. One, the first is in terms of not betraying others, be present to their needs, know them, know their history, understand them, be compassionate and empathetic towards those in your life that you do care about. Be completely present. And when you do that, when you embrace and embody that, your whole life changes. Now, in terms of not being fearful, in terms of moving away from fear, with respect to betrayal, it comes to knowing self. So the deeper we know ourselves, the deeper we are connected to who we are, the more we enhance the possibility and the potentiality of drawing into our lives deep alignment to our values and our purpose. If you can resonate with that, place a number 9 in the comment box, please. Fear of betrayal is huge. And it really, again, all of these fears simply stop us and stop us from moving forward and acting in accordance with our power and our truth. We have to understand that. When we begin to understand that, we begin to master our fears through moving through them, through allowing them, assimilating them, and allowing them to become an integral part of who we are. We change the way we view the world, and we change the way we relate to people, ourselves, and fear itself as well. So again, if you're just coming on, place number 1 in the comment box. I can't see any of the comments right now. There seems to be something wrong with Facebook. But of course, please comment away and I'll get to them later. I'm sure they're coming up. I'm hoping you're not having the same problems as well. So the second fear, or the next fear, which is, this is actually huge. I mean, it's prevalent in both men and women, but it's tremendous in men more than what people know, is abandonment. Having a fear of abandonment. And again, holding that fear within ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, it ceases us from moving at depth. We remain in the superficial in relationship. Now, there's nothing wrong with superficial. We need superficial in relationship because our brains compartmentalize, our brains segregate, our brains place important information in certain areas of our consciousness or our access to immediate memory, and it just stores the rest. So, and we gain that through a superficial or a prima facie association of the world that we live in, okay? So we need the superficial. Now, where most people become undone, and again, having a beautiful conversation with a friend a couple of days ago, yesterday, is we come undone where we remain in the superficial for too long because we have a fear of going deep. We have a fear of what that may uncover, what that may unpack for us, what that may reveal to us, because essentially the relationships that we have are beautiful mirrors of ourselves, beautiful mirrors of the parts of ourselves that we cannot connect to, that we do not quite understand, that we do not quite grasp. Relationships, especially intimate relationships, do this beautifully for us. They bring out this ability for us to see aspects of self that we could not see before. So when we hold very deeply a fear of abandonment, we do not wish to go deep because in that depth we touch on that nerve of abandonment. We touch on that nerve of being let go, of being released, of not being allowed to be present, not being allowed to be in full communication with ourselves. And unless you have the fortitude, the resilience, the prowess to continue moving through that pain, you'll never neutralize or you'll never equilibrate that fear of abandonment. And it really breaks us down. And eventually, if you are someone of substance and you wish to be someone of substance, but you are not engaging in substance, two things will happen. You will get very bored of a relationship very quickly and you will create circumstances and reasons as to why to leave the relationship, and or your partner will do the same. Just sit with that for a moment. And if you've experienced that, place number 10 in the comment box and perhaps share a little bit about what it is you've experienced in that space. And if you have questions, beautiful people, please do ask them in the comment box. But again, I'm sorry to repeat myself for those of you that are hearing this a few times, but I cannot, maybe for those that are coming on, I cannot see the comments. There's something wrong with my algorithm in Facebook, or the algorithm, it's not my algorithm, but the algorithm in Facebook at the moment. So I'm not quite getting these, I'm not seeing any questions at all come up. I wrote a question there. It came up, but I'm not sure. I can seem to write a comment, but no one else. I can't see any others. But anyway, we shall continue. So the next fear is simply being hurt. Like simply being, just the simplicity of it is just simply being hurt. Us being completely hurt by the other. So what do? We isolate. We play it safe. We rest our laurels in the realm of superficiality. We do not go deep, because the deeper we go, the more we enhance the opportunity of us being hurt, emotionally hurt, psychologically hurt, physically hurt. Now, where do these fears come from? Where does this particular fear come from? The reality is it can come from many places. More than likely, it has come from an event or an experience or a series of experiences during our felt and formative years, where we have then placed an attachment to these particular experiences or experience, and we've developed an insecure attachment style to ourselves, to the world, and to the people in our lives. And what this does is it really sets us up for moving away and doing everything we can neurologically, kinesthetically, viscerally, physically, to not allow ourselves to be hurt. So we retract, we constrict, we close in, and we're not open, beautiful beings. We're not loving life, living life, engaging in life, present to life. We're, in fact, really disconnected and losing in life. So, feel how that feels for a moment. And that's a painful place to be. And there's something that will always be nagging at us, and that inner something is, hey, you are not living life. You're living in fear. You're not doing what you love. You're not embodying who you really are, and you're losing yourself in the process. That becomes a dangerous combination for severe depression, severe sadness, and severe isolation. Place number 11 in the comment box if you can resonate with that. Next fear is not being loved. Now this really comes down, and like straight off the mark, if you can resonate with this, number 12 in the comment box. And this really comes down to self-worth. Self-worth, self-value, self-care even. Self-esteem to some extent. I don't often use the term self-esteem. It makes sense to many of us. So we'll use it in this context, no problem. But self-worth, when our self-worth is low, like when it's really, really low, we have this fear of not being loved because we perceive ourselves not to be good enough, not to be enough, not to be connected, not to be full. We are unworthy of love. That's really painful. It's deeply painful to be in that position of having a fear of never being loved. Am I good enough to find love? And however you define and describe love, and I've put a few posts up lately, the last few months really, that are speaking to the undefinable nature of love, but still attempting, as I enjoy a challenge, and I'm sure many of us do, still attempting to somewhat give context and structure and edge and softness to, at the same time, to what love actually is. But this fear of never being loved, and then pursuing love or pursuing intimacy and connection and bonding, because connection is one of the core human needs, like the fundamental drivers of our reality and of our actions. And then pursuing this fulfillment, this meaning, this connection, but coming from a place of desperation instead of inspiration, because we do not value ourselves. So you come from this place of desperation instead of inspiration, and we make decisions that aren't really aligned with our highest values and our highest good. And what happens is we end up being hurt more. So we go back to feeling that fear of being hurt because there is so much friction and misalignment in that relationship, because we come from a place of low self-worth. So we take what we can get because we think we are not good enough to deserve, we are non-deserving of an empowered relationship because we have such little self-worth. So we have to look at these fears and how they really drive our behaviors. They're not just very simple, basic fears. They're complex, they're layered, and they're deep. Number 13 in the comment box, if you can resonate with that, and if you've experienced that or are experiencing that in your own life as well. Losing trust, the fear of losing trust. So in other words, not trusting people, not trusting the people in our lives, and more often than not trusting ourselves. not trusting ourselves for who and what we truly are, and not trusting ourselves for our ability, our capacity to express our potential. Again, this becomes deeply, deeply problematic for the quality of the relationships that we have, and the quality and the well-being that we experience in relationships. In fact, we experience very little well-being and quality in relationship because we cannot trust people, or we have this deep, deep fear. Again, all of these are interlinked and connected, yeah? So when you're talking about a fear of not being able to trust, we're speaking to a fear of being hurt as well. We're speaking to a fear of potentially being betrayed. So we don't want to lose that trust. We don't want to be disconnected from that, where we are in an intimate partnership, or we have very close friends or family or whatever it may be, whatever dynamic it may be, and we don't have that love. We don't feel that trust. We don't feel that we can trust people. Like, we feel, it makes us feel so incredibly unsafe. You know, I've been that person in my life where I've been ambiguous. I've been living a life that it hasn't been on purpose, hasn't been in purpose, and it hasn't had clarity. So the beautiful people, especially my intimate partners, have felt that lack of safety and security, and I've perpetuated that through my own actions. And then I've also been in a relationship where I haven't felt safe myself, where I haven't felt emotionally safe and stable. And it's because ultimately for me, it was I didn't have that trust in myself. I wasn't able to trust who I was because I was so scattered and fragmented and fractured and broken within myself. And ultimately what this did was really disconnect me from me and disconnect me from my partners. Now, as a man, we don't, as a human being, we don't want to be not on purpose. We want to live a life that's on purpose. So I set about a few years ago to, whilst in very deep remorse for so many of my actions, to really transmute and transform the way I chose to be in relationship to myself and to others, and made a very, very distinct, clear, open, loud promise to myself, not from fear, but from inspiration, from a place of wanting to, and deeply choosing to be a different human being. So I'm not going to be this person, or I'm not going to be run by my fears that affect the way I behave in relationship, which is deeply unconscious, deeply primal, and deeply disconnecting. So I made that choice to not be that person anymore. We all have a capacity to do that when we begin to know ourselves and look at the depth of who we are. So number 13 in the comment box, if you can relate to trust, that fear of trusting others, of opening your heart, of opening your soul, because perhaps you've been hurt before, perhaps your primary caregivers couldn't hold that space and hold you through your own challenges or difficulty, or perhaps a previous partner hasn't been able to do that, or a figure that you've revered and trusted, but they've let you down, and now you are unable to trust. So you don't want to get into a relationship, trust someone, then lose that trust because of their actions, because you can't trust their efficiency and effectiveness in being in relationship. But the reality is we're human, and we have to hold empathy and compassion in our hearts for ourselves and for others. We have to do that in order to grow, like to really, really deeply grow. So I think I said number 13 in the comment box, if you can resonate with that. And finally, a fear of the unfamiliar, a fear of the unknown. Now, fear of the unknown in relationship is really daunting. So what generally happens is, I'll make this as succinct as possible. As adults seeking intimate partnership and intimacy in relationships, we generally will pursue and seek what we consciously and unconsciously did and did not receive from our primary caregivers from a very young age. So what that means, we will seek what we need to heal within us. Our voids become our values, and we fill those voids with experiences that are often just on repeat. And they're generally toxic, and they're not for us. They actually do not serve us until we grow, learn, and thrive from them, until we can expand through them. So I'm hoping that makes some sense. This is really profound and powerful when we come from this place, and these realizations that I've had around this personally have been tremendously empowering for me. Tremendously empowering for me. So what we do is we remain in the familiar. Now, the familiar may be toxic for us, or the familiar may not work for us, it may not serve us, but we remain there because we have a fear of the unfamiliar. We have a fear of, well, this is unknown to me, therefore I'm uncomfortable, therefore I do not feel safe. So we move away because we do not feel safe. But more often than not, it's in the unknown, it's in the mystery of life, in the unknown that we find our wonder, we connect to our core, our beauty, who we are. That becomes so empowering for us and for all of our relationships. And we grow through our relationships in this space. We really, really grow. We come from a beautiful place of heart, and we become open to what the relationship may unfold, the unknown nature of the relationship. And if the unknown nature of that relationship is different to what we are familiar with, and if that familiarity is causing us harm and is toxic in our lives, then the unfamiliar is so much better. And if you can relate to that, please place number 14 in the comment box, and maybe share your experiences around your fear of the unknown and how it has stunted your growth, or it has stopped you from pursuing excellence or jumping into profound experiences, the potential of a profound experience, and whether it be something that is personal, maybe jumping out of a plane, for example, or reaching great depth in a relationship. Life and relationships can be tough, and it's okay for them to be tough. It's okay for relationships to challenge us. It's healthy for relationships to push us to our edge. That's how we grow. And it's healthy to feel fear in relationships. We often negate the power of feeling the full spectrum of our emotions in relationships. So it's time now to step out of that fear, out of the multiple fears that we held. And I've just listed 12 today. 6 in general in life, and then 6 very specific in relationships. I sure do hope these comments are working when I'm about to sign off soon. Be you, express you, come from a place of love, challenge your fears, challenge yourself, challenge your ideals, your behaviors, your norms, your status quo, challenge your belief systems. Challenge all that you are in order to grow. Learn to be with you when you need to be with you. Learn to take massive, overt action when you need to. And you only learn this when you allow yourself to immerse yourself in the fullness of who you are. And the paradox is you need to feel it all, to be it all, to know what you wish to choose to embody, what you wish to choose to fully express. Especially in intimate partnership. Observe your relationships and ask yourself, where have I felt these fears in my relationship, and how have they affected my ability to experience wonder and love and beauty in every area of my life, especially relationships. I have a 9-area of life model that I've developed, and in that model, we go through in great depth every area of life and achieving or embodying harmony, harmonious balance in those areas. And we do so in part by moving through our fears and softening the fears to the point where they do not influence and impact us anymore. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to say thank you for your interaction, even though I can't see it. I'm sure it's there, and I'll have a look in a moment. I'm going to say many blessings on your journey. Thank you so much for being here. For more videos like this, jump on my YouTube channel, S.Sifandos. And of course, reach out with any queries you may have. But I'll see you again on Thursday evening for another live feed. Thursday evening is going to be interesting, actually. I've already got the subject matter for that, and what we're going to dive into with respect to relationship as well. So that's going to be fun, really, really fun. That's going to look at trauma and wounding, and we're going to explore how that really affects who we become and how we become, and what types of relationships we have because of that, and the opportunities that those experiences can actually give us. So thank you so much for being here. Please have a beautiful evening. Many blessings on your journey. Please reach out if you have any queries, and keep those comments up. I hope they're there. And I shall see you on the other side. Thank you so much.